You ever wonder where you actually stand when it comes to retiring early? Like, are you on track? Are you falling behind? Or maybe further ahead than you think? As a financial advisor who specializes in early retirement planning, I've worked with people at every stage. Those just kind of scraping by, those who think they're ready but aren't, and those who have more than enough but are still worried. So today I'm going to walk you through the 5 levels of early retirement wealth so you can see where you stand, you can learn how to avoid some of these costly mistakes, and figure out what you need to do to get to the next level. And some of these levels may be surprisingly relevant to your own situation. And I think this is super important because if you don't know at what level you're at right now today, you could be making all the wrong moves. And I've seen people retire too soon only to realize they weren't ready. Others were overly cautious and ended up with more money than they could really spend while missing out on those years of freedom. Now, you don't want to be in either of those situations. And once you understand some of these levels, I think you'll start to know exactly where you are and then exactly what type of things you can do to start to level up. So let's start with the first level, which I call the frugality zone, which is the first level I see when it comes to an early retirement. Now, when I think of people that are in the frugality zone, really there's quite a minimal amount of savings. Really, this level is just focused on covering the essentials, and really there's not much flexibility for anything beyond that. Now, without the cushion of Social Security, which is not going to be available until age 62, the risk of running out of money is pretty high. Some of the challenges that this retiree might face would be vulnerability to things like medical bills that are surprises or home repairs, having an emergency. And the truth is that at this level, your plan is so fragile that you could potentially have to go back to work. This is actually where a lot of Americans are at this point, with the average 401k balance for most people in their early retirement years around $200,000. Now, I know that's the average. There's folks with more and less, but I think that's a good ballpark. And if you think about it, with the rising costs and just let's say we use a rule of thumb like the 4% rule, that could generate about $8,000 per year of income. Again, that's just a rule, but even for the average American, that just won't cut it. At this level, if someone does retire early, people in this position are typically going to underestimate how much they actually need, and a lot of people overestimate what the ability they had to make it work. So what do you do if you're at this level? I'd say the first thing to do is reassess your timeline. Now, I don't like to ruin all the fun and say, no, you should probably keep working, but sometimes I have to. Giving yourself just a few more years could make a massive difference. Really, once you're at this point, your savings needs to be focused on building a stronger foundation. The second is to start cutting that financial dead weight. Now, this is where I encourage you to really audit your spending and focus on the essentials and focus on ways you can eliminate, for a lot of people in this category, high interest debt. And thirdly, start to seriously stack your emergency reserve. Now, ideally, I'd like to have somebody with, in this category, at least 12 months in that emergency fund at this point, because you have serious risk in your plan if you don't have that cushion and you get hit with a financial curveball. Now, once you have those 3 built, you can start to move towards level 2. Now, next up, we have what I call the stretch zone, and this one can be a little bit tricky because at this stage, you've made some pretty significant progress towards an early retirement, but there's tension in maintaining your current lifestyle. For example, someone might have a good nest egg, maybe you have $1 million, but that's all pre-tax. And you realize that after taxes, your income may only cover your essential expenses. And it may be really a push if you want to have more discretionary spending. For example, with this category, a big expense like a roof repair, although it won't ruin you, it could still stress you out and really affect you potentially down the line. Someone in the stretch zone may also likely be carrying some manageable debt, but might just still be lingering there. This is a stage where you're really close, but not quite where you want to be. You might be able to make it happen at this stage, but again, you might be pushing it. Now, all these things put pressure on your financial course. This is also where I see people making really big mistakes, like locking themselves into a bare bones budget. Think they'll just adjust, or you know what, we're going to retire anyway and just figure it out. Now, spoiler alert, that rarely ends well. So here's what you can do to continue to level up if you're in the stretch zone, right? Number one is to clarify your spending. Get clear on what your true expenses are, what you want to spend on travel, your hobbies, healthcare, and account for inflation over time. $1 today is not going to be the same as $1 in the future. So what are your costs today? Will this change over time? Will some of these expenses keep going? And perhaps will your mortgage or car payment, other one of these big expenses get paid off at one point that's going to reduce the need for a portfolio spend? The most common reason there may be stress at this level is because there is no plan. You've been saving away for years, but the lack of confidence is really coming, in my opinion, from not understanding your own finances. Can your investments support your living? Does one more year make a difference? Does cutting expense make a difference? Again, these are all the questions I'd be thinking about if I were in the stretch zone. But really the most important thing here is that you are starting to make this shift and getting closer to the next level, which is a really interesting and newer concept of retirement that maybe some of you might relate to. And this next level is one of the most misunderstood stages when it comes to early retirement, and it's called the coaster. I call it the coaster. This is the person, usually someone that has saved enough wealth to stop aggressively saving or saving at all, but maybe they're not quite fully retired yet. They've given up the stress of chasing more money, and instead they sort of coast. Maybe they take a lower paying job they enjoy, work part-time, or maybe run some sort of passion project they've been really passionate about, not because they have to necessarily, but they have the option to. And their investments can certainly take care of their needs, but it's kind of like, I'd say, biking up a steep hill. You did all the hard work on the way up, but now you can let gravity sort of do the rest of the work for you as your investments grow. Of course, you still have to stay on track and steer and watch out for potholes, but in this stage, a lot of the heavy lifting has been done. Now, for someone, this is the ideal situation, but for others, this stage is risky. Some of the challenges at this level include inflation risk. At this phase, you really want to make sure your investments grow, continues to keep pace with inflation. Secondly, healthcare costs are a big factor. Now, many people are going to go from an employer-sponsored insurance plan to now the marketplace insurance, and coverage can be pretty expensive depending on your tax situation. The third challenge I kind of see with this area is what I call stagnation. You might settle into the comfort and think, I'm ready to slow down, but you start to ignore some of your finances that you worked so hard on earlier on in your career, and you miss out on all the great tax planning and some of the details that make a big difference at this level. Now, if you're at this point, here are a couple things that you can do to really level up and make sure you're in a really strong position. Number one is, of course, is to invest strategically. Even though you aren't aggressively saving anymore, you need to make sure your money will last for the next 40 plus years. Number two is to plan for future withdrawals. This means optimizing taxes, and for some of you, that means bridging the gap. Maybe you have to take a little bit from your portfolio until Social Security kicks in, and there's going to be a shortfall that you need to make up. And number three is having an exit strategy. Now, if you're working part-time, lay out a time. Hey, when would you want to fully retire? If you don't want to retire, at least have a point in the future where you can pull the plug if you wanted to. Now, planning for these three up front will put you in a fantastic position to be financially independent and also avoid making mistakes after building that great foundation. Okay, and the next stage is what we call the stable zone, and this is where things start to feel really good. At this stage, your savings and income streams can fully support your lifestyle, and you have the wiggle room for discretionary spending. You likely have a limited amount or no debt, really no. If you do, you may have some low interest debt. You have a diversified income portfolio. Maybe you have rental income, a taxable account, a tax-free account, and enough to cover unexpected expenses without stress. Now, generally, I don't believe in the 4% rule as an actual retirement strategy. I think it's more of a guideline and it's more conservative when it comes to actual planning for retirement. But generally, if you can live off 4% of your investments at this point, or a little bit higher to bridge the gap between now and Social Security, and also you're able to cover healthcare costs, you're in pretty solid shape. There's of course other factors like taxes and other income sources, but this is the ideal zone for most people to get into in order to have a successful retirement. The challenge for this group is, what accounts do I pull from when I retire? What investments should be in what accounts? How do I cover expenses when the market drops? And then also, how do I do this all in a tax efficient manner? And of course, to level up at this stage, from my experience, you'll want to focus on three things. And these are the three top things that we help clients with. And number one is to create a tax efficient withdrawal strategy. Now, balancing the right amount to take in withdrawals from each account based on your situation can really go a long way, especially over a 30, 40, 45-year early retirement period, and you're not wasting money on taxes. And number two is not just optimizing your asset allocation, the mix of investment, also asset location. For example, a common mistake I see for people, they come to me and I see there's a lot of bonds in their Roth, their tax-free account. Now, ideally, if I own a Roth account along with other accounts, this account where I want to use it to maximize growth. It's really important to look at not just one portfolio each time, but also put it all together and look at your total combined portfolio. Thirdly is optimizing for risk management, whether that's through your health insurance, whether that's through covering yourself through a great estate plan. This is really that next level where we're really starting to minimize a lot of the risks that can jeopardize what you've worked so hard for. Okay, so finally we reach the top of the stage known as financial abundance. Now at this level, you're not necessarily a sinking ship. Like, you're not so much worried about running out of money. Your biggest expense, and many people recognize this going forward, is going to be taxes. And then secondly, this is a category where you're in a position, well, hey, I want to leave a legacy to the next generation, or be in a position where I get to fully enjoy the money that I saved. I don't want to die with millions of dollars in the bank when I can enjoy it while I'm living. I can enjoy it with my heirs. Some of the challenges really for this group are things like large required minimum distributions from IRAs. Maybe you've saved a significant amount, typically over $1 million in a IRA 401k. Now at that point, it's really going to create more income for you than you might need. Secondly, it's going to be large capital gains on investments. Maybe you have an investment property. Maybe you have owned an employer stock that has done really well. And how do you make sure, hey, is it time to take a little bit of risk off the table? Do I need to start managing this? And also, how do I do it in a tax efficient way? And how do I start going from growing my wealth to also preserving my wealth? So let's finally talk about what really moves the needle in terms of planning for this group. Number one, I'd say, is a long-term tax planning. Strategies like Roth conversions or charitable planning can reduce your tax burden and maximize your giving and your planning when it comes to leaving a legacy. Now, using estate planning tools for this group also could be a big factor. And overall, the third one is just maximizing your income. How do you make the most amount of income so you can fully enjoy what you've worked so hard for? So for those of you watching at this point, what level are you in? More importantly, what's the next step that will get you from where you are today to where you want to be tomorrow? I don't want to sound like a broken record that I mentioned this in most videos, but early retirement is not about just a number. It's about creating a lifestyle where you have the most amount of freedom, flexibility, and peace of mind. And if you're at the level of stability or abundance right now, and you're not sure if, hey, am I ready mentally or financially to actually retire early? I made a video going through everything you need to know and some of the signs that I look for as a financial advisor to show me someone's ready. You can watch that by clicking right here. And once again, this is Matt Calcagno, financial advisor at One Degree Advisors. If you'd like to talk with me or someone on my team about your plan to retire early, click the link in the description below and we'd love to talk with you.